When Roe was ruled originally in 1973, abortion was not a controversial issue then. And to be really clear, it's not controversial now. Over 70% of Americans support the right to abortion, but you wouldn't know that if you look at the Supreme Court ruling or at politicians.
Στις 24 Ιουνίου του 2022, το Ανώτατο Δικαστήριο των Ηνωμένων Πολιτειών Αμερικής ανέτρεψε την ιστορική απόφαση Roe vs. Wade που προστάτευε εδώ και 50 χρόνια το δικαίωμα στην άμβλωση. Από τότε, περίπου 1 στις 3 αμερικανίδες έχουν χάσει την πρόσβαση στη διαδικασία, αφού τουλάχιστον 14 πολιτείες έχουν απαγορεύσει τις αμβλώσεις. Η Tarah Demant, Διευθύντρια Προγραμμάτων Συνηγορίας και Κυβερνητικών Υποθέσεων στη Διεθνή Αμνηστία ΗΠΑ, βρέθηκε στην Αθήνα και μας περιέγραψε πώς είναι για μια γυναίκα να ζει στην Αμερική χωρίς να αποφασίζει για το σώμα της.
So with Roe v. Wade now overturned and at least 14 states having totally or near totally banned abortion, what this means for women and people who can get pregnant is they don't have basic control over their own bodies. So, the United States is a huge territory, and we have 14 states. Some people have to drive thousands of miles, thousands of kilometers to just get basic health care. There's also so many barriers to getting an abortion, even where it is legal. You might have to go twice for an appointment, or you can't use telemedicine for your doctor. Ultimately, what it means is that people are being forced to carry pregnancies against their will, that they're being forced to seek out unsafe methods of abortion, and that they're not in control of their own bodies in a massive part of the country.
Abortion is a human right, not just for the rich and white. Abortion is a human right.
With Roe v. Wade overturned, women and people who can get pregnant have fewer choices. They have less control over their bodies. And it's not just a question of abortion, it's also difficult to get birth control or prenatal care. So the United States ranks last among high-income countries in maternal health care. It means it's more dangerous to be pregnant in the United States than any other high-income country. So it's not just a ban on abortion, it's also an attack on our ability to be safe in our own bodies, to have safe pregnancies, or to choose not to carry a pregnancy to term. It's also a compounder of poverty, so this impacts different people more than others. So for the poor, for Black and brown people, Indigenous people, they're less likely to have access to healthcare in the first place, which means they're much less likely to have access to safe abortion care. They also disproportionately live in states where there are now bans, so there's an unequal impact of these bans in the United States. There's been a long campaign to chip away at our rights in the United States. So when Roe was ruled originally in 1973, abortion was not a controversial issue then. And to be really clear, it's not controversial now. Over 70% of Americans support the right to abortion, but you wouldn't know that if you look at the Supreme Court ruling or at politicians. What this has been is a concerted campaign by a very small minority, largely religious minority in the United States, that seeks to impose their religious view on other people and has worked for 40 years to strip this right away. But it's not just abortion. They're also fighting against birth control, against equal marriage, against equality in work. And those things are all at risk now that Roe has been overturned.
It's insane. We pretty much went back 100 years with this Roe versus Wade overruled. It's insane.
So since the fall of Roe, there have been multiple pro-choice groups and human rights groups that have been working to fight back to get this right. But also there are abortion providers, abortion funders that are working on the ground to try to get people the health care that they need and deserve, including abortion care. Sometimes that means raising funds because health care in the United States is very expensive. And now that people have to travel to try and access abortion, it can cost you thousands of dollars just to get somewhere. You have to take off work, you need a hotel room, the cost of a procedure, the cost of medication. So there are lots of people at various ways. The most important thing is that advocacy groups and people who provide abortions are working at the local level, at the state level, and at the federal level to win back our rights. The role of anti-abortion groups in the United States is very strong, way more strong than it really should be, because it's not representative of people. It's a very, very small minority, but they're very well funded. They're very, very well funded. And these are groups that will stop at nothing to try and strip away abortion rights. And that includes enacting violence against abortion clinics or abortion providers. It includes denying women and people who get pregnant abortion care, but it also means fighting against birth control or sex education or equality. And these groups, they're the minority view, but they're very powerful. So they are also working at very local levels to deny sex education or access to birth control, at the state level to enact these bans that people now live under, but also ultimately at the federal level, which has allowed this. So already in the US Congress, there has been introduced an abortion ban that would ban abortions across the United States, because of course these are state bans that are now allowed because of the fall of Roe. So they're also working at every level. They're funded by right-wing interests. So these anti-abortion groups are funded by political right-wing interests. So again, there are people who oppose abortion. They are the minority, but the people who fund them are right-wing politicians and right-wing political groups that are doing so to gain political power. And they may or may not actually care about abortion, but they know that they can motivate this minority to really get involved and to elect right-wing politicians because of these anti-abortion commitments. Again, even though overwhelmingly in the United States, people support the right to abortion, the United States voting situation is very complicated. And so you can have a clear majority support something, but a minority sort of run a map or run the election and have it come out the other way. As you know, we have midterm elections coming up in November. You might have seen the news that in one of our states in the middle of the country, Kansas, which is a very conservative state, they had a public referendum on abortion rights and whether or not to reduce the right to abortion. Overwhelmingly, Kansans voted against that reduction. They voted for abortion rights. So when people are allowed to vote to protect abortion rights, they do, including it, again, this is a very conservative state. It's not a liberal state. What we have, though, are, of course, elections for candidates coming in November. And this has become a partisan issue, unfortunately. Human rights are not partisan politics. They're not political, but it's been made political in the United States. Overwhelmingly, Republican candidates have fought against abortion rights, and Democratic candidates have fought for abortion rights. And we'll see how that plays out in November in the midterm elections. Again, these elections can be hard to have them be fair. Oftentimes there are many laws put in place preventing people from voting, needing identification, certain types of identification that are more expensive, so it excludes the poor, or you don't have voting rights if you've committed a crime before, so it excludes lots of people. So there are ways around democracy that we don't know what that will mean then in the election, even though it's a very, very popular issue. Whether or not people are allowed to vote, that remains the question. The United States decision doesn't only affect people in the United States, although that's, of course, the biggest impact. But there is the concern that this will have a ripple effect around the world. But make no mistake, this is out of sync with the rest of the world. The rest of the world is moving towards more rights, particularly towards liberalizing abortion laws. The United States is wildly out of step with the rest of the world. Countries like Ireland and Argentina have moved towards, these were previously places that we would have never thought abortion rights would be allowed. And these have moved towards more liberalization. That's true overwhelmingly across the world, no matter the region. There are unfortunately holdouts, and there are people who are regressing now, like the United States. Poland is another example in Europe where you have an increased restriction on rights. And these are, in English we say, a canary in a coal mine. This is an indicator of what's coming. When politicians come for abortion rights, it's not just about abortion. It's about restricting people's rights and trying to build political power. That's what we see in the United States. That's also what we see in Poland. It's about concentrating political power, shutting down protest, shutting down people's ability to control their own bodies. Luckily, the rest of the world is tending and trending towards opening up those rights, towards understanding that controlling your own body is a basic human right, and abortion is central to that right. Amnesty International, as a human rights group, is really central in this argument because, of course, abortion is a healthcare issue as well. It's a health issue, but also your right to be able to have the highest standard of healthcare, to control your body. It's a central human right. So it's really important that Amnesty is part of this. In the United States, it's really important that Amnesty is there talking about the human rights situation, but that's true globally, and that's one of the things that makes Amnesty so important in this, and including and especially in the United States, is it reminding the United States and everyone that we are global, we have global agreements, global human rights agreements, and that we're all part of this global world together. So one of the things that's made Amnesty so critical to this has been the global voices of people weighing in, including here in Greece, who have been contacting governors in the United States, these are the head of each state, asking them to protect the right to abortion in their state and reminding them that people all over the world, including in Greece, are watching, and that human rights violations are a global problem. They are a global issue. So I would encourage people to get involved, to take action, to go to www.amnesty.gr, to make a donation to Amnesty International, to stay involved, to get involved here in Greece with your local, the local work here, and to take action, particularly on the United States, but for all of our rights.